This is a very special presentation I want to do today, a bit of an extended workshop, and the workshop is called You Can't Speak to You That Way. What I want to delve into today is how we speak to ourselves, about ourselves, and how much of that is we've just got it so wrong. And, if we're presenting ourselves to the world as someone who we don't particularly feel that great about, then, and then we're expecting other people to feel better about us, that's kind of on us in a little bit of a way there. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about how we speak and feel about ourselves, and then how we present ourselves to the world after that, right? So the three main things I want to talk about today is what we think about ourselves. Secondly, what we say about ourselves, and that's mostly to ourselves. And then thirdly, what we need to be ourselves, right? So what we need to, in order to be the self-actualized best version of ourselves today, what we need to be feeling, thinking, saying about ourselves, what we need the world to see of us as ourselves today, to be our fully best version of ourselves today, tomorrow, and into the future. So to start with, I just thought I'd very quickly run over who I am and my experience. There's some people watching, I'm sure, who don't know who I am. So my name is Nick Bowditch. I come from a tech startup background and a marketing background, but more recently I've become a mental health advocate, and in particular a men's mental health advocate, in particular an entrepreneurial mental health advocate, because I've become aware through my own life living with mental illnesses that, a lot of people who are in this sort of small business, startup, entrepreneurial space are more predisposed to have some challenges that they live with as well, to have some mental skillness, as I call it, because I don't really like mental illness. So, if you're one of those people, then welcome aboard. If you're in the Superhumans group watching this today, then you already know that you're one of us. And if you would like to join a free Facebook group full of people like us, who have these superpowers and special gifts about us, then you can go to facebook.com/we are superhumans. We the superhumans, and you can join us for free there. Bit more about me. So I come from that background, but now I'm a speaker, and I speak at international conferences as well as national conferences and events all around Australia and fortunately the world. And I'm a best-selling author as well now. I've got 2 books. One is called Reboot Your Thinking, and that was the bestseller. And the second book I have is called Actually It Is All About Me, which is about codependence, which we will brush on today as well. I'm also someone who lives with, as I said, some mental illness. I live with depression and anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a result of some childhood trauma that I endured, and now I kind of live with that every day. I'm also a recovering addict, and I'm very aware of my limitations and my sensitivities, as which actually makes me very aware of yours too, and much more ready and able to accept you for who you are with those superpowers. I talk about superhumans and superpowers a lot because I feel like if I think about my depression, my anxiety, the PTSD, the trauma that I have, if I think about those things as defects of my character, then they will absolutely be defects of my character. But if I think of them instead in terms of reframing that story, if I think of that as instead as a superpower of mine, as things that make me superhuman, then that helps me. That helps me be more comfortable with myself. It helps me say nicer things and feel nicer things about myself, which helps me in the whole journey of this mental health thing, and really is the way that I can stay balanced and grounded and happy and hopeful and positive for the future. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And now what I do nowadays, apart from the writing and the speaking, is I work with clients. I've got a counselling degree as well. So I work with clients one-on-one and in small groups, doing coaching and counselling for all sorts of different things that people come to me for. People I tend to attract a lot of people with addictions, because they can see that I know their struggle, and people who live with depression and just mood disorders and stuff like that that I do as well. There's a few kind of underlying things that the majority of people bring, and one of those is the feeling that they are just not enough. And we talk a lot about that because I just don't think it's true. I just don't think it can possibly be true. But we'll get onto that a little bit later as well. Also, at the end of this workshop, we've got a little cheeky special offer in terms of my coaching. So if you stick around, we'll get to that as well. Right. So first of all, what we think about ourselves. So much of where we are today, where we'll be in the future, how we are and how we project ourselves to the world is tied up in, first, what we think and feel about ourselves, right? So there's lots of things that go into that. Everybody carries some sort of level of guilt and shame and fear and these human frailties that make us all human, but also bind us all and keep us all kind of in the same boat. Some people deal with that stuff better, some people don't. Some people think of themselves poorly because of those things, and some people don't. The biggest one of those things, I think, is guilt and shame. Shame sucks. Shame's fucking awful, right? And it's awful to live with, and it feels like sometimes, for some people, it feels like you just can't escape it. You just can't get out. You'll never get out from underneath that stuff. So if we're talking about guilt and shame and that changing how we feel about ourselves, I think it's important to know the difference between the two. Because one is relatively harmless and relatively easier to live with than the other, and that's guilt. So the very basic distinction between the two is guilt is something you've done, shame is something you are. So, if I think about, guilt says, I did something bad, right? And I feel bad about that. But shame says I am bad. And that's a very big distinction. You can see how one is kind of easier to live with than the other. And then even in the shame, there's levels of shame that are more or less harmful or more or less harmless. If you get up on stage with your fly undone, that's healthy shame. There's no, like, if someone puts it out, yeah, you're embarrassed or whatever, but you'll get over it. But it's the toxic shame that I want to talk about today, the stuff that a lot of us feel and live with and just can't fucking escape. And it's too hard. It's really hard. And that stuff compounds and accumulates and doesn't ever get better until you start to pick away at it and become aware of it and really know it for what it is. But before you even get to that, I think it's important to differentiate between those two, the guilt and the shame, right? The second thing that I think people bring certainly to sessions with me and the work that I do with them, but also just bring to their life every day, is fear. And the things that we're afraid of are often the things that bind us, the things we can't climb out from underneath of. And part of the problem with how we're dealing with fear generally as people and as society is we're told by the media and by our parents and by our families and communities all the time, you've got to beat that fear. Get out and fucking beat that fear, and then you'll be good. Then you'll be okay. Which also says that if you can't beat that fear, you can't be okay. And I just don't think that's true, right? So just plug this in here. So, I think part of dealing with fear is actually just learning to live with it and around it, as opposed to trying to break it and solve it and cure it and beat it forever. The reason I talk about shame and fear and guilt is they're the sort of the things that start creating our core beliefs, the things that we absolutely believe to be true about us and can't fucking escape them. And the problem with the majority of our core beliefs is that they are not true, right? So the last little bit of this, how we think about ourselves, I want us just to think about what our core beliefs might be. So, there's a long list of mine, but they might be things like, I am too old, I am ugly, I am fat, I am dumb, I am too smart, I am too young. I am invisible. I am insignificant. Whatever these things are in your life that become the constant record that plays in your head about yourself, that becomes a core belief, and it becomes very, very difficult to stop believing that. And the only way you can stop believing that is by introducing the truth, right? So, for instance, for me, my two my two most common core beliefs are that I am unlovable and that I am unworthy. And pretty devastating stuff, right? If you let yourself really get underneath that. But if I introduce some truth to that and say, well, is that actually true? Then I can also see that I am worthy. I'm worthy of what I have because I have worked hard to get it, and I've sacrificed a lot to get it, and I've been through a lot to get it, and I've uncovered and picked off scabs to show the world who I am to get it, right? So I know that I am worthy. I know that that core belief of mine that I am unworthy is not true. In my most lucid and well moments, I know that that's not true. The second one, I am unlovable. I know that's not true too, because I have children who love me. My babies absolutely love me, and I love them. I adore them, right? But I know that they love me, which means I also know that the core belief of I am unlovable is just bullshit. It's not real. It's not true. So I think so many of these core beliefs, and you might have completely different ones to me, and I'm sure you do, but so many of them are challengeable and changeable if you just introduce some truth. And a lot of the work that I do with my clients is just sitting down and going, well, that's not true. That's not true, is it? And then we sort of unravel that and pick at it. And sometimes they just can't be told that it's not true, and we work around that. But that's kind of where it starts for me. In what we think about ourselves, that's where it starts. That's where it's most important. That's where it's most difficult. That's where the really hard work is how we think about ourselves. Because then what it does is lead into what we say about ourselves. And this is the basic universal truth of almost everybody that I work with personally, all the clients that I work with in the coaching and counseling space. They all speak very poorly about themselves to themselves and to me and to the world sometimes. Sometimes that's not quite so overt and it's kind of hidden, but you know that they're saying it to themselves. And I'm forever sort of breaking that, disrupting that chain of someone I'm working with will say, oh yeah, but I'm stupid because of this, or I'm dumb because of this, or I'm shit because of this, or whatever. And I have to stop them. I want to try and stop them at that point and challenge that. Two questions I commonly ask them in that space is, would you let me speak to you that way? Would you let me call you shit, or call you stupid, or call you whatever? And they invariably say no. And then I say, and you know what? I wouldn't let you say that to me or anyone else either. So I'm not going to let you say it about you, and it's just often it's just that disruption, just breaking that cycle of stop saying that to yourself. You can't speak about you that way, right? And often that's just enough for people to go, oh shit, yeah, I do that all the time, and it doesn't fix it like that. Trust me, that's not a silver bullet, but it's a good start. And it comes through, sometimes it's session after session where I say to people, hey, well, don't say that. Don't say that if you don't really mean that, or don't say that anyway, even if you do mean it, because it's not true, right? So when we talk about ourselves, that self-talk is really, really important, because that self-talk becomes our inner voice, becomes our personality, becomes who we present ourselves to the world as. And the problem with that sometimes is that our inner voice is actually just somebody else's outer voice. If you've grown up to be an adult, then there's a good chance that you've grown through some sort of trauma or disruption at some stage in your life. And during that time, somebody would have said something to you, maybe repeatedly, that wasn't particularly positive, or that might have been a little bit sort of negative in nature or whatever. And if they've done that enough, then that tends to be something you believe, you hear. You make their outer voice your inner voice. And so if they're always telling you that you're not enough, that you're not smart enough, that you're too dumb, that if only you were like your brother, if only you were like, or you are totally like your dad, or whatever it might be, then that eventually becomes true. It becomes not only truth, but it becomes embedded in us to the point where we can't escape it. It becomes one of these core beliefs, right? So just be very wary. I think we should all be could all be a little bit wary of whether our inner voice is a result of someone's outer voice. Has someone's outer voice become our inner voice of how we speak to ourselves about ourselves? Because, when I hear people say that they are not enough, or people say that they are too dumb, or that they're whatever it might be, I'm always reminded and struck by the fact that I don't think anyone would say that about themselves if it wasn't influenced by somebody else. I don't think it's an inherent natural behavior for humans to talk ourselves down. I think it's a societal thing, and I think it's a construct that's around us in families and communities, and it comes from this tall poppy shit in one part of it, and it becomes in you don't want to stand out in another part of it, wherever it comes from. I don't think it's a natural thing. I think it's a learned thing. I don't think instinctively we think we're shit. I think we learn that stuff. And the reason I think that is I look at my children who are, before they went to school, and they're only in primary school now, but before they went to school, they were the king and queen of the world, man. Like, there's nothing that's going to bring them down. There's nothing that's going to make them feel bad about themselves. They haven't learned that yet. It's a bit like, when kids talk, when kids speak about the world, about other kids or whatever, there tends not to be racism or sexism or any kind of, negative sort of talk about the other people in the community for them. They don't see that stuff. It's us that sees that. We're the broken ones. We fucked that up, and we'll fuck them up too if given the chance. If our outer voice becomes their inner voice, then that's how they learn that stuff. That's how kids learn hate. That's how kids learn how to be, to be racist, or to have some sort of sexist objective, or, whatever it might be. They don't have that when they're born. We're not instinctively like that. So that's what I think we should just be very, very, very aware of, is that voice that we have, is that ours? When someone says to me something negative about themselves, and I'm able to say, hang on, whose voice is that? Who's saying that? And when they really unravel it, they might be, oh, that's my mum. My mum has said that to me all my life. Or, some teacher at school said that to me, and I've never sort of not believed it. I've never gotten past it. And it's shaped their whole life. It's shaped their whole career. I think we could be very, very aware of how we speak to children in particular, because that stuff lasts. That stuff gets embedded. That stuff becomes their inner voice, which becomes the core belief, which becomes this really, really limiting thing. And I don't think that's a great thing either. So that's quickly through what we think about ourselves, and then what we say about ourselves. And then the last thing I want to include in here is then what we need to be ourselves. What things do we really need to be the best versions of ourselves tomorrow, the next day, and into the future, right? And this is where this codependence idea comes in, because in the codependence really informs how we speak about ourselves, the stuff that we say, which obviously then informs how we feel about ourselves, right? So if you don't know if you've never heard the term codependence before, codependence is kind of the easiest way or the best way that I've heard it described is asking somebody how you feel. that you need somebody else's input in your life, that you need someone else's reflection in your life to be who you are, that you want to give to somebody else, and you're a people pleaser. You need to convince people that they're okay, all the while never looking after yourself and never actually asking anybody else to look after you either. If you do that enough, if that becomes part of your programming and pattern enough, then that modeling makes you a codependent person who will always need somebody else in their life. They'll always need to give to somebody else. They'll always need to ask somebody else how they're feeling. They'll always need to be validated and built up and supported by somebody, instead of actually just reflecting on their own strengths, their own awareness, and actually building themselves up and relying on themselves. That stuff is hard, right? But it's also the best thing about the awareness around codependence is to be aware that we are all a bit like that. In different times and different moments of our life, I think we're kind of all like that. But sometimes it becomes a very limiting thing, a very toxic thing. In my second book, which is actually It Is All About Me, which is about that codependence, I talk about, how putting yourself first has such a bad reputation, has such a bad rap. But I think it's so important, right? I try to make every single decision in my life, I try to make based on how does this affect me first? And I know that sounds really selfish, but hear me out, right? If I'm a really codependent person and I put, my partners or my children or my clubs or my community or my work or my friends or whatever, if I'm constantly putting all those people on top of me, ahead of me, right, in terms of love and care and attention and direction, then I will always be putting myself down the rung, down another rung, down the rung. Make sure you're okay. Everyone's okay. I'm here just to make sure everyone's okay, right? No boss is there to make sure I'm okay, but that's all right. I'm making sure everyone else is okay, right? That's kind of how people in this codependent space live, right? The problem with that is eventually you might get jack of that and start to really resent all of the other people in your life. And these people who you love dearly and who, for the most part, are completely unaware that you've developed a codependence with them. And then all of a sudden you're resenting them and not wanting to do it. And you're like, you know what? For the last 15 years, all I've done for you is cooked and cleaned and made sure you're okay, blah, blah. And I'm not doing it anymore. And you blow up and you become this disjointed, malaligned person because the people that you're codependent on or codependent with, who have no idea about that probably, are starting to push back on that, or you're starting to push back on the resentment towards that. It's not healthy, right? The other thing that happens is eventually one of those people who are above you, one of those groups of people who are above you in this pyramid of attention and love, because you've put yourself down underneath them to make sure they're okay, eventually they're going to really need you, right, for something. And if you've just been beaten down and beaten down and beaten down, and if you feel like you're a less than version of yourself, and if you feel and say poor things about yourself, then you're not able to be the best version of yourself for them when they need you, right? Which is why I think I just think it's so important that we put ourselves first to make sure that we can be the absolute best version of ourselves for somebody else when they need us, right? Super important, super simple in theory, but it's very, very difficult, mostly because we have this reputation, or it has this rap of being, making you a selfish bastard. And I don't think that's true. I think when you put yourself first, it's actually a really selfless act because you're creating a better version of yourself to be able to share when it's needed, as opposed to just be able to share all the time because that's what you do. You must make somebody else feel happy or whatever. All right, so that's the first thing, the codependence thing, that really, that's what we when I talk about what we need to be ourselves, I think we need to be relatively free, or as free as we can, from this codependent thing. Secondly, the introspection and the awareness to be able to listen to that inner voice and listen to those core beliefs and ask 3 really simple questions. Is it real? Can I change it? And does it matter? Right? When I feel like wronged or when I feel kind of resentful towards something, or when I absolutely believe that somebody else believes something about me, or somebody else is saying something about me, and these people they're not saying things about me, they don't even care, right? But I get really kind of fixated on things like that. And when I can challenge it, and when I'm able to have the awareness to go, whoa, I'm going to just step back, and I'm going to see here, 1, is it real? Is that real? Does she really think that? Did he really say that? That's that sort of thing. 2, can I change it? Can I do anything about that? Even if it is true, can I do anything about that? Right? And then 3, does it even matter? So much of what kicks off my superpowers, so much of it comes from something that isn't true, that I can't change, it's beyond me to change, and that doesn't really matter anyway. Right? So much of it, it's mental how much of it is like that. Especially when there's so many things that I can change that are real and that do matter in my life that are not getting my attention at the moment because I'm caught up in something that's not real, unchangeable by me, and that it doesn't matter anyway. Right? So sometimes especially in the work that I do with my clients, we stop a lot and go, hang on, is that real? Was that real? Did he really say that? Do you really think that? Is that really the truth of it? And sometimes yes, sometimes no. But then when you can go on and say, okay, can you change it? Can you do anything about that? No. Okay, well, does it matter? No. So let's stop the merry-go-round, right? Let's get off. Let's stop putting that person ahead of us in love, attention, and energy, and start to concentrate on our own stuff, right? So is it real? Can I change it? Does it matter? Really important, right? Then the third thing that I think we need to be ourselves, to be the best version of ourselves, is to have some resilience, right? The resilience is kind of adorated, it's kind of like, oh, it's a big thing that everyone wants, but I think everyone has it. I think it's in all of us. Sometimes it's buried under some pretty nasty trauma or some pretty nasty self-talk or some pretty sort of crippling codependence with someone else or whatever, but I think we all do have it. The problem with resilience is the only way to it is through a series of fuck-ups and hardship and shit. That's the only way you can find your resilience, right? It's the only way you need it. So, people are kind of, oh, I don't really want it because to get it, I have to make all these choices. I have to expose myself in all these ways to all these people and make myself feel less than. Otherwise, I'm never going to get it. So I'll just not be resilient. But I do think that we all have it, and I do think we all need it at different times in our lives. And if we're talking about how we speak and feel about ourselves, then resilience is a key thing to stop thinking poorly about ourselves, to stop speaking poorly about ourselves, and to be better at that. Is it real? Can I change it? Does it matter? That the resilience, having some resilience from different trauma, from different negative things that happen in our life, from different difficult families, difficult communities, difficult marriages, difficult children, difficult parents, whatever it might be, that the resilience is a great weapon against that stuff. And I do think that we all have it in us. Some people sort of seem more resilient than others because you hear more about their tragic, traumatic backstory. And then you go, oh, here they are. Like, how resilient are you? But really, they're probably no more resilient than you. You just know more about that backstory than they know about yours or other people's backstory and stuff like that. So I think resilience is a big one for me. It's something that people say to me that I'm resilient from what I've been through and from what I live with every day. But I don't think it's true that I'm any more resilient than anybody else. I think it's just dependent on backstory, dependent on trauma, and how open and authentic and real you are about sharing that story. That determines how resilient people see you or not, right? And the last thing that in that little bit then is showing up, right? So I talk about, I talk to my clients a lot about how good for them that they've shown up to engage me, to go through therapy sessions with them, counseling sessions with them, and pick all these scabs off and put my thumb in and really dig out the stuff that that's holding them back and that they're holding down, so that they never have to want to relive that or whatever. And it's not helpful, it's not healthy, and it's not helping them move forward. For them to be able to engage me in these sessions, that's showing up, right? But then the further to that is, I want to encourage them to show up for themselves every day, to be your own advocate, to stand up and say, listen, I'd rather you didn't speak to me about like that. Stop that. I don't like it, as we teach our kids to say. Stop it. I don't like it. I don't like what you're saying. I don't. When you say that, I feel it makes me feel this, or I feel unhappy with myself when I hear you say that stuff, whatever it might be. Just showing up for yourself and being on your team, being your own advocate. That's a big thing in what we need to be ourselves, I think. And it's a big thing if you want to beat this codependent thing, or at least not beat it, at least just live with it and manage it a little bit better. That codependence can't survive in an environment where somebody is really resilient and shows up all the time for themselves. It just can't survive, right? So I think showing up is a really important thing, whether you do that in the therapy sessions or whether you do that just by standing up for yourself or reclaiming some of your lost power, or not letting somebody speak to you in a way that you don't think is an appropriate way to speak to you. Whatever it is, that showing up that's power. That's real power, and that's how you reclaim that power, right? And then the final thing is then in what we need to be ourselves is we need, and I hate this word we need, right? I'm very non-prescriptive in things. So for me to keep saying need, it's kind of like a fingernails on a blackboard to me. But I think in this context, it's important. We need to know that we are enough. We need to know that nobody is not enough. And I stress this as the final point for a reason, because I would say almost universally, almost 100% of the people who sit across from me when we have these coaching counseling sessions are either saying to me, or I feel like they're thinking about themselves that they are not enough. Whether it's smart enough, rich enough, clever enough, good looking enough, whatever it is, or whether it's just not, I literally, none of me is enough, right? But I want to challenge that, because I just think it is patently and inherently untrue. I don't think it's possible for somebody to not be enough. The example that I use here is when we're born, every child that's born is born with the same inherent human value and human potential, right? A child born today in Syria and a child born in the eastern suburbs of Sydney on the same day, on any day, are born with the same human value. Their life will be different. Their influences are different, their community is different, their biases grow differently, all that stuff. But when they're born, no child is born more valuable than another child, which means no human adult has more value than another human adult, which means no human adult is not enough. It is patently and absolutely untrue for you or any of us to think that we are not enough. It can't be. That can't be true, right? And when you can wrap your head around that a little bit more effectively, it affects everything dribbling down from that. It affects how we then think about ourselves, how we speak about ourselves, how we let other people speak to us. Because if we're in a position of not feeling like we're enough, we're going to let somebody else speak to us poorly. And if we do feel like we're not enough and we're projecting that to somebody else, why would anyone speak to us properly? Why would anyone speak to us as if we do have that value? We have to show up. We have to reinforce to the world, to our environment, to our communities, to our families, our partners, our children, our parents, every minute of every day that we are enough. And that hasn't changed, and that will never change. And if somebody can't accept that, if somebody in your life cannot accept that you are enough and that that's indisputable, then that's their work to do. That's their shit. That's on them. That's not on you. If you can enter into every single day, every single human interaction and every single day, knowing that you are enough to be there, that to be anywhere, knowing that you're bringing what you need to bring. And if the other person can't see that, that's not your fault. That's got nothing to do with you. What someone thinks about you has nothing to do with you. It's none of your business. It's all theirs. Every single one of us is born with the same human value and will die with the same human value. Every single one of us is enough. And if you can't feel that, if you can't wrap your head around that now, I want you to just think about that. Maybe introduce some affirmation to your life every day to just keep telling yourself that it's true. The more you tell yourself, the more you write something down, the more it's true. As the superhumans know, I say that all the time. But, it is true. You are enough. You always were, and you always will be. Nothing will change that. Right? So what we need to be ourselves, I feel like, is an escape as much as we can from our codependence, right? To be able to ask yourself the very important 3 questions. Is it real? Can I change it? Does it matter? Right? Having resilience and building and nurturing your own resilience as much as you can, showing up for yourself every single day, and knowing 100% that you are enough. Nothing can change that. Nothing. Right? So that's it. That's what I want to talk about today, and I hope that's sat somewhere with you, maybe one part of it or maybe all of it, because I do think that it's important how we speak about ourselves. I do think it's important how we feel about ourselves, and I think the biggest importance of that is how we think and speak about and feel about ourselves will eventually be how somebody else does too. And so we can't then be angry or be disappointed or frustrated by how somebody else is feeling about us if they're just reflecting how we feel about us, because that's what we're projecting. And I think that is a very real risk for us, So finally, the offer. So if any of that stuff has sat well with you, has resonated with you, has challenged you, or made you a bit uncomfortable or whatever, and you want to work something out in terms of sitting across from me and maybe picking off some of those scabs and doing some of that work, then I'm more than happy to do that. What I can do is offer you a free 20-minute phone call with me or one of my coaching team and be able to just say, okay, do you think we're a good fit? Because if we are a good fit, then we can go on from that, and I can tell you how we work together and whatever. But without that first 20-minute phone call, sometimes it'd be a leap of faith for you, or it would be me entering into a situation where we were mismatched. And I'm not prepared to do that because I feel like that might set you back as opposed to bring you forward. I think it's important that we are a good match. So if you would like the free 20-minute phone call, all you need to do is email me, nick@nickbowditch.com.au, nick@nickbowditch.com.au, and mention that you saw this webinar and that you would like to take me up on the offer of the 20-minute chat. During that 20 minutes, you'd be amazed what we can work out, and in terms of whether we're a good fit for each other and all of that stuff. And I'd love to work with you, and we can go on from there. Alternatively, you could go to my coaching page on my website, which is nickbowditch.com.au/coaching. It's nickbowditch.com.au/coaching, and all of the information is there about coaching packages and how I work with people and what makes me a good coach for you and how we might be able to work together as well. But that's kind of the offer. Whether you take that up or not, I'm not as bothered as whether you've heard and some of the stuff and had some of the stuff that we talked about resonate with you today. I really hope that's true. But going forward from today, I really think that we would all benefit from speaking, feeling, thinking better about ourselves, and then knowing the things that we need to be ourselves and searching those things out doggedly and unapologetically, finding that resilience, finding that ability to show up for yourself, and holding more than anything the knowledge that absolutely 100% unequivocally you are enough. I really hope you've enjoyed this session or got something out of it. If you have, I'd love to know in the comments. You can put some comments in or whatever. Give me some feedback if you'd like, or ask me any questions you'd like. Take me up on that 20-minute phone call if it's something that you want to do and you want to work with someone around the stuff that's going on for you at the moment. Or check out my coaching page, as I said, at nickbowditch.com.au/coaching. And thank you very much for your time. How we go? 40 minutes, man. Okay, so if you're still here after 40 minutes, then I hope that we are able to work together and get something out of this, because it's important to me and hopefully it's important to you. I hope you have a great day wherever you are. Thanks so much for watching. See ya.